Hello and welcome to Too Much Effing Perspective, the podcast where we swap stories with rock stars and entertainers about their real-life Spinal Tap moments. Those times on the road, on stage, and in the studio that may not have been so funny when they happened, but are hilarious in retrospect. I'm your host, Alex Hoffman.
And I'm your co-host, Alan Keller.
We are in the midst of the concert touring season. Mm-hmm. Every band and their grandma's band is on the road right now.
I know. I'm personally going to see Buddy Holly at Milwaukee's $1 Million Ballroom with Richie Valens, Dion, and the Belmonts, and the Big Bopper.
What do you think this is? Back to the Future?
You know, you said every band was on the road, so I just took you at your word for a change.
Within reason. The members have to be alive. Okay, let's start there. But in any case, as a former concert tour manager, this time of year brings back a lot of memories for me, including one of my personal Spinal Tap moments and actually the reason why I quit touring.
You know, you never told me why you hung up your date planner, whistle, and your condom dispenser. Tell us.
My condiment dispenser, yes. I always had ketchup, mustard, and Worcestershire sauce with me at all times. But I have been saving this story, Alan, for a special occasion. And since we never had one, I guess I'll just spill the beans now.
All right, go ahead, shoot.
Speaking of Back to the Future, let me take you back to 1996. And a new tour had just kicked off with a band I worked with a lot, the Bodines. The Bodines are from Milwaukee on Warner Brothers Records. And it was their first full tour after their song Closer to Free had been a huge radio hit. So this inaugural show of the tour was a co-headline with none other than the Goo Goo Dolls, who also had some hits around that time. And we were at some college in Minnesota. So the Bodines were traveling with a lot of gear. We had a semi full of lighting and sound equipment and all that kind of stuff. And this being the first show, there was just a lot of stuff to iron out. Plus, the Goo Goo Dolls were only playing this one show with us. And so we just had to get things sorted and make sure that everything went smoothly for everyone. The band, the crew, and of course the audience.
I'm glad you cleared up because I always thought it was the Goo Goo Dolls, but now I know better. So what happened on this tour, Alex?
That day, the Bodines road crew and I had already been at the venue for a number of hours, and the Goo Goo Dolls showed up. They had one or two vans, something like that. And I thought to myself, okay, good. I can now talk to their tour manager, and we can tie up some loose ends and get some things going here. So a few minutes later, the tour manager strode briskly into the middle of the room, looked around, and loudly announced to no one in particular and everyone in general, "Johnny's got to take a shit. Where can I find a private restroom?" And of course, he was referring to the Goo Goo Dolls lead singer and heartthrob, Johnny Resnick.
Johnny was so good looking, I'm kind of surprised he ever went to the bathroom.
Maybe he never did. Maybe this was the first time.
You have no
Maybe
proof.
That's why it was such an emergency.
You know he went in there, but you don't know what he did.
I
Yeah, I understand.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. I didn't...
your business.
Didn't... None of my business about him doing his business. But anyway, I was dumbfounded. I had ample experience myself having to find a decent place for the musicians in my care to sit down when nature called, but I really was struck by the absurdity of this situation. Their tour manager, I think his name was Ross, and I were both adults with real responsibilities for ensuring that evening show went off without a hitch. And there were important things for us to talk about, yet the number one priority on his list was for Johnny, who was also an adult, and actually at that point wasn't even that big of a star, to find a place to take a dump. And it was at that moment that I said, I'm done. This is my last tour. I had all the perspective I needed. And frankly, Alan, fortuitously, it was too much effing perspective.
Is that why you never tour managed my band, The Falling Melendez? Because, you know, we were potty trained. You wouldn't have had that problem with us, but you passed.
Well, I also wanted to get paid. So that was part of it too. But yeah, had I known, maybe. But this really was the final straw for me. And so all levity aside, I did resign after that tour was over. I thought my career as a tour manager was done. But, you know, the truth is I did go out on the road one more time a year later when I needed some money. But my heart was really no longer in it.
And that crack about us not being able to pay you, well, that's because we flushed all our money down the toilet. You know that. Taking flights to Minneapolis when we were getting paid $35.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, fortunately, our guests seem to be a bit more resilient than you, Alex. We have gotten a surprising number of stories about this very topic, having to use the facilities for whatever reason on the road, and the hazards and slices of humble pie that can dish up. So while our listeners locate their cans of Febreze, we're going to take a quick potty break.
You mean a commercial break, Alan?
Yeah, commercial break, sorry. Our first story comes courtesy of Patterson Hood and Mike Cooley from Drive By Truckers, whose bandmate at the time, the Grammy Award-winning artist Jason Isbell, learned the merits of wearing nondescript footwear in public restrooms. Okay, tell us about one of your band's more absurd Spinal Tap moments.
I think of Jason Isbell trying to take a shit that night in Detroit. And bless his heart, I know he wouldn't care me telling this story because I'm pretty sure I've read him tell it before. But back when Jason was in our band and he was basically shitting his brains out in the stall.
We've all had to try to get through the show with our dinner not agreeing.
Yeah, and so he's in there just taking a monument. And the guy somehow, I guess, had either seen him walk in or recognized his boots. God forbid, I don't know. For some reason, the guy outside the stall knew it was him and started like engaging him in conversation. And Jason's like, "I'm sorry, man. I'm really just trying to take a shit," and it completely wigged him out.
Well, there's a fine line between shooting the shit and actually shitting.
Next up is the affable Dan Konopka of OK Go, whose decision to use an impromptu urinal gave him a lasting reputation at one of Boston's classic rock clubs.
There's a place called the Paradise Club, and it's a really great rock and roll club. And this is like maybe the first or second time we'd been there. And the dressing room for the openers was sort of like a glorified broom closet. And it was maybe 50 or 60 feet from the patron's bathroom. And so you could set your backpack down in there and you could hang out there if you wanted to, but you don't. And so you just walk around. And by the time that we were done with my set, I had maybe, 4 or 5 beers. And instead of making the trek to use the patron's bathroom, I decided to just pee in the closet where all of our stuff was. Well, when I started doing that, somebody was in there I didn't notice that worked there and stopped me and was super upset and said I had to leave and they were going to get security and they were going to kick me out because I was actually peeing in the bucket that had all the marquee letters in it. And I didn't know that. And the next day we're driving and I get a phone call from our manager saying that the Paradise people are super upset because one of the OK Go dudes pissed in the marquee bucket. So I ended up calling the club and apologizing to anybody who would listen until finally I talked to somebody that was important enough to say, like, we're cool. And that was embarrassing. No one in the band knew it because I didn't tell anybody. And they were like, what the hell's wrong with you? Why would you do that? And so we go back to the Paradise maybe a year and a half later. And on the drum riser, there's a bucket sitting next to my drum chair that's got Dan's piss bucket written on the side of it. And that happens every single time that we play there for like the next 7 years. Like every time awesome. I get there, there's this piss bucket. That means that the story has changed hands and passed over to all these different people that have worked there. And like, maybe it's become legend. I don't know.
Sometimes artists can be real prima donnas about their private facilities, even when those facilities are a porta potty. Well, multi-Grammy nominated jazz singer and my friend Tierney Sutton shares a story about the time one of her bandmates took liberties with Keith Jarrett's loo.
My band was in Marciac for the Marciac Jazz Fest, and our bassist needed to pee, as people do sometimes. And it was, it's an outdoor festival, and we're backstage, and and he saw this freestanding bathroom and he was peeing in it. And suddenly he hears this pounding on the door and says, "Who's in there? Get out of my bathroom." And it was Keith Jarrett, because he has his own private bathroom. And Kevin wasn't supposed to be in there. So like midstream, Keith Jarrett's yelling at you to get out of his bathroom.
Speaking of porta potties, it's one thing to use the wrong one. But as bassist and producer Shane Solosky tells us, it's a whole other thing to have the one you're in get relocated without prior notice.
We're playing a festival. I don't even remember where it was. And sound check's always super early in the morning because people show up at 11 o'clock for the festival. So we're getting ready. I throw my guitar on stage and I had to relieve myself from all of the caffeine I had drank. So I needed to run, and there was a porta potty and I needed to go use the porta potty. Now there was a big giant line. You know, it was a festival. So there's a line of like 60 porta potties. It must have been like 8 a.m. or something. And I just randomly picked a porta potty. You know, I'm in there, I'm standing, and my pants are unzipped and I'm doing my business. And all of a sudden, it felt like I got hit by a truck in there. And all of a sudden, I'm at a 45-degree angle, trying to hold myself up. And it's the whole thing. It's like an earthquake, but I'm at like 45 degrees. I can tell I'm not on the ground anymore. Like, what is going on? This is just madness. And I'm banging, trying to get out, making as much noise as I can. And then I start moving. A forklift has come and picked up the porta potty. And it drove me for what had to be 10 minutes. And I'm like holding myself up. And he drove me to the other end of the festival, which had to be 2 miles away. It's just 20 minutes in a porta potty.
And we'll be right back after a short break. We learned the definition of oil spotted when Billy Idol's keyboardist Paul Trudeau nearly became a man without a country after being left behind during a midnight bathroom break in Romania.
You're not on the bus when it has to leave, so they leave. So it's oil spot, right? So this is my first tour with Billy Idol, and we were in the Eastern Bloc countries like Romania and, Bulgaria. And so middle of the night, I'm in my bunk, and I hear the bus stop and stopping for gas. And so I'm like, all right, I could go use the restroom because you're not supposed to use the restroom in a certain way on the tour bus. So I'm like, okay, great. I go use the restroom. So everybody's asleep. And I get out and there's the bus driver, this German dude, smoking a cigarette, filling up. And I wave to him. So let him know I'm getting off the bus. And I brought my phone with me, thankfully. Everything was so quiet. And I was actually having this really zen, peaceful moment. And I come back around this gas station and the bus is gone. And I literally was like, holy crap, like I had no idea where we were. And it was like a deserted gas station. But there's one guy getting into a little car and I go, did you see the bus? He goes, yeah, they left. And then he goes, come on, we'll catch them. So I jumped into his car and we speed off. And after about a mile, we're coming up on a border crossing. And I'm just thinking, holy crap, all I have is my phone. And so I don't speak the language. And we're there. And the driver guy's like telling them, is this American? I didn't have a passport. And he remembered the tour bus going through, like our story checked out. And I just kept calling my drummer, Eric, who picked up the phone, thank God. As soon as he saw that it was me calling, he knew that I wasn't calling him from my bunk. He kind of put together what it was. So the bus circled back to the Border Patrol. I wasn't panicked because I was so focused on trying to work it out. When I was back on the bus and reflecting on it was when I started realizing the possible gravity. I mean, it's one thing to get stranded in Peoria, Illinois or something. but it seemed like not a place you want to be stranded without your passport.
Humans aren't the only ones who need to deal with intestinal chaos on the road. Here's a story Styx lead singer Lawrence Gowan told my former bandmate and current Styx drummer Todd Suckerman about the time a couple big cats and a monkey made a mess of things.
The show's going to open up where Lawrence is going to be standing there holding two chains, one holding a lion, one holding a panther, and then with a monkey on his shoulder, like a circus grinder monkeys. Behind the stage was the truck bay. So even though Lawrence is holding these animals, those animals were tied so they couldn't leap out and lunge into the audience and maul and kill people, right? But it was going to look like Lawrence was holding these beasts. And the lights go on. All of a sudden, the audience, there's a audible because holy shit, there's a panther and a lion and this dude in this getup with a cape holding this stuff, right? Like a top hat. And something happens and Lawrence realizes, I'm allergic to cats. He sneezes, the monkey jumps off his shoulder, goes on his keyboard rig, and then starts climbing up the lighting truss going, and just the mood all of a sudden gets kind of uneasy. And the lion starts to move and kind of chuffs a little bit. Then the panther moves and steps on a Moog Taurus pedal. And if you don't know what a Moog Taurus pedal is, imagine the low bass pedals of a pipe organ. It's the lowest subsonic frequency like synthesizer thing that you can imagine that shakes your eyeballs and shakes the room and shakes your gut. So the panther steps on this. And this freaks out the lion, who roars. Now, this freaks out the panther, who projectile shits buckets all over Lawrence's keyboard rig and all over his white shag carpet. Now, as this is happening, the monkey's still up on the lighting truss going, and now Lawrence had to go walk behind his keyboards and play the whole rest of that show with panther shit all over his stuff, standing in it in the white rug.
And the granddaddy of all shitty stories comes from Corin Tucker and Carrie Brownstein of Sleater-Kinney. They tell us how Nature's Call led to an emergency evacuation of their dressing room at Red Rocks.
Up above the main stage, there's this weird little cave. You just take a little stairway up to, and it's built into the side of this mountain, this canyon or whatever you want to call it. But it literally is a cave, right? So you open a very heavy door and it's several rooms, cave room here for the crew. And then, there's a couple of rooms for the band, but it's this long, windy cave where they had to bring our wardrobe cases up here and bring all our stuff back there. But we were just ecstatic to be there. There's pictures of Stevie Nicks on the wall and talking about Fleetwood Mac being there, every famous person. All of these amazing package shows they had in the 80s. We're like looking at all this before we play. The weather is, for this show, beautiful. It was a gorgeous night, wasn't it, Carrie?
Yeah.
It really was.
It really was.
I'm trying to set the stage here, trying to set the scene.
Work with me here. Work with me.
And we all have friends and family there, right?
Wait, are you setting up for something to go wrong? Because I feel like it was a good show.
No, after the show, remember?
No.
Oh, all right, let's just tell the story. Okay, so we play this amazing show. I have friends out in the audience. Our drummer has his entire family there.
I don't know where you're going with
and we play this incredibly beautiful show. We're like high on life, but it's still COVID, right? So right after the show, we have to go up to our dressing room, right? We can't be mingling out there. We're like doing very strict protocols, right? So we very obediently go right back from the stage into our dressing room, which I mentioned before is like a cave. And we open that door, and all 6 of us in the band are just like, yes, we did it. We played a great show. We walk into that dressing room, and someone has taken the biggest dump.
That's right.
Like, epic. And it's the tiniest space. There's no windows. It's inside of a cave. And so we walk in there, and it's like particulate. It was so
Gross.
disgusting.
Story.
It was like walking into an outhouse.
I loved also knowing that it had to have been someone we knew that was taking that opportunity while we played to have a private moment.
Wait, was it in a toilet or was it?
No. It was in the toilet, but I'm just saying like the whole dressing room was like a tiny tin can inside of a cave.
Yes.
Yeah, the glamour and the squalor. They sit side by side on tour.
They really do. They really do.
Alex, as you know from the trip you and I took to Eastern Europe back in 1998, I'm very private about my ablutions, particularly my morning ablutions. So this episode was not something I was extremely comfortable with.
Thanks, old chum, for indulging me.
Well, that's fine, I guess, this one time. So let's close the lid on this one, flush it, and hope for no skid marks.
That's the spirit.
I'm disgusted with myself, frankly.
Too Much Effing Perspective is a Milwaukee Talkies original. Our editor is Gretchen Kilby. Our music composer is J.K. Harrison. Visit our website at tmepshow.com to sign up for our mailing list and find our other episodes featuring rock stars, comedians, and entertainment luminaries whose bizarro stories we enjoy and we think you will too on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Evergreen Podcast Network.